do you think?
You know. The hunger, the passion, the drive.
You know,
That is
better.
so critical. It's
You
so
and you
critical.
face.
If you don't have
When you
that,
sleep, you know.
it's so critical, you know?
One thing I appreciate is
Oh, okay.
whole class as well as the experts, which applies to everybody here.
No, what you want.
Trust me, whatever you guys have, I swear you have more than I had when I started.
I don't want to contract.
And the idea of this being another success story,
I think it's like a wall.
it's not like I started in 1800.
The banking has changed too, so.
Yeah, but you know what? Look,
Very.
let's say you have a piece of land, you have a tenant, definitely a Western Union. That tenant is a name brand, a good name company, right? Let me tell you, but you go to the bank with that lease, you assign the lease to the bank, so that if you go bad, the bank takes it over. You'll get your loan. You know, I could have spent another hour talking about it. It's hard to put 30 years into an hour and a half. You know what, I'm going to put my
Oh,
email.
is that it?
Oh, yeah.
I think you wrote it.
Okay, and keep in mind,
You know, fantastic.
just so you know, this is the letter O, not a zero.
What is the name of the company?
Craig Carpenter Associates. You can find it on Google. But that's the letter O, not a zero. Okay? My pleasure. I really enjoyed being with you. So very much. My pleasure. Do it anytime. I got 20 more topics. I really enjoyed being with you guys. Really. Thank you. What's very nice is that it's not a bunch of kids. You guys are like adults. It's not like I didn't know what I was coming into. I thought maybe I'd be seeing, a lot of, 18-year-old kids. I don't know. But you guys are mature people.
And we're hungry. I'm hungry.
But saying it and being
No, I'm doing it.
baby, you
I
gotta.
have a full-time job. I fly from Atlanta down there every weekend. I stay in a hotel, drive, because I'm getting what I want. I want to do the numbers.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay, guys. Nice seeing you. Where's my plumber friend? I hope he still likes it. I hope he's not waiting up in the hall with Oh, here's my plumber friend.
I don't figure it out. Right. Only one page. Oh, well, experience.
Sure, go in there or two.
Yeah. I never figured it out, but he's gonna come back.
It's been a full day.
Yeah, so far.
We still got 2 hours to go. Well, actually 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, probably extra 15 on that.
It sounds like he's an understanding wife, right?
I know one. Be solo, man. I did kind of want this. Been married. Hate all, presentation.
Yeah, we're still missing Brandon, Janae, Jeff. Mary Ellen. Who else? Yep.
I meant to go ask you guys earlier, they were talking about condominiums and like what's the process? The normal to like go to condominium.
Well, if you want to get a mortgage easily, that's why they basically have pretty much pay cash.
Right, okay. But otherwise you can just buy it and then rent it.
Right. Unless the condominium association has a restriction on the number of units that can be rented out. And a lot of them do. Because they don't want the entire complex to be rental, because that can impact their wherewithal in terms of their home mortgages.
Yeah, the mortgage companies, they frown on that.
Yeah, they usually like to keep it well above 60% or something like that of owner occupants. All right, we're still missing a few people. Where are they? the hallways.
Anybody have any Tylenol?
Okay,
Not here.
I got bills.
I usually have. Let's see if we can make it first.
one more time.
Chatting with guests.
You got some already?
No, I need it. Which one you got?
Yeah, not a lot.
Well, it depends. Okay.
Yeah, 325.
How much was that one?
I need that. This one?
She's like mixing up drugs.
This is preventative. Yours. Yeah, this is it. Thank you. This is, yeah.
So, before we jump into some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, let's just kind of wrap up, I guess, kind of some of the things that you guys got to see today, and also 2 weeks ago, so we haven't really had a chance to recap on all of this. So, general thoughts about everything. The speakers, that sort of thing.
Quality. Good. I think they were geared towards the worker bee mentality. I mean, I would like to hear more people like Craig, the entrepreneur type, versus the guy that say, hey, well, I control $5 billion of this, $5 million of that, but what's your salary? 100,000? I mean, talk to me about the entrepreneurship of the business, not the...
Well, you know, and to bring, you know, sort of maybe some closure to the question that you asked this morning is, there's not an absolute salary number.
Right.
Like, for example, you go through this program, there are no guarantees, none. You know, and it's all about you and the skill sets that you can bring to the table. You know, if you clearly are a master of the skill sets as you go through the program, that you do a really great job with the Argus developer, the Argus DCF, you build great financial models in Excel, you do a great job in writing and packaging your work and understand how to go out and collect the information, present it, you're going to do great. You're not going to have any difficulty. You know, not either finding a job or potentially going out on your own and being an entrepreneur. But if you're one of those sort of folks that, sits back and doesn't really put any effort into it, and just kind of is going through the motions and expecting to, just walk away with a piece of paper, you're probably not going to do that well. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I prefer, me personally, I just prefer the entrepreneur side of the business. I'm not...
No, and I can certainly appreciate and understand that. And some of my best friends that have never held a job in their life, other than being an entrepreneur, I totally, completely, see it's a very interesting mindset that you for the most part have to have. But sometimes there's a lot of luck associated with it as well. I mean, you make your own luck, but to a certain extent, there is a fair amount of being in the right place at the right time with some of those sorts of things.
Right.
Sure, this course is focused towards commercial,
Right.
And normally the price range, even if you're very fortunate to get investors, it may be difficult to entrepreneur by yourself
Right.
into the commercial realm.
Unless once again, you start with small projects.
Right.
And and that's why so many folks say, well, you start off with, buying that first little single-family home and potentially, learn how things work, or buy that first little commercial building, learn how things work, and then ultimately you leverage your way up to the next larger project. I mean, even myself, the first project commercial project I did was, I bought a 6,500 square foot building in downtown Bryan, Texas for like $100,000 that effectively, it was one of these two-story shotgun kind of buildings, 25 feet wide by like 125 feet deep, built in 1890, was originally a saloon and a whorehouse whenever it was built, okay? And it had gone through a number of uses, over it's basically a 100-year history whenever I bought it in the late 90s. And whenever I bought it, all the buildings buildings in that area, in the downtown area, no one was valuing the second floors, because no one was using the second floors, because originally when a lot of these buildings were built, the second floors were kind of like storage. And I was like, why can't we simply put office space on the first floor and make the second floor, residential? And you'd think that I was speaking some sort of foreign language whenever I went into, the local government and said, this is what I want to do. And ultimately, they finally just, I think after my persistence, they just acquiesced and said, okay, and as long as you can satisfy the inspectors and kind of get through the process, whatever, but no one else had done that in that particular, area. And so I did it. That instantly doubled the value of the property, okay, instantly. And then, took that model, replicated it, a handful of times in the area, as did one of my business partners. Simple thing. But it was like, sometimes, you have to sort of look for those weird little opportunities. And sometimes maybe it takes, in my case, I was brand new to that city. In the sense, I had just gotten a job as a professor at Texas A&M, and in 1998, and I was like looking for more interesting opportunities, coming from a larger city, going to a smaller city, and it was just a very unsophisticated market. And you just, realize very quickly, well, there's, demand here for rental, for whether it's student housing or faculty housing or whatever, that no one was tapping into at the time. So for me, that's where I got my start on the commercial side. On the residential side, I'd done a few house renovations and things like that. But then ultimately, that sort of turned into a situation of where then I met up with some folks that owned a fair number of properties and a family trust, and was able to basically buy about ultimately 7 or 8 properties from them that they owned or financed. And so I didn't have to go through all the traditional headaches and hassles of going through a traditional lender, and then ultimately renovate those properties and sell them. So everybody's got a different story as to how they kind of get into it, but most of them, if it's you're starting out with your own money, it usually starts out with something much like that.
No, just my perspective, kind of helps me is a life lesson. I would just personally never chase the money. It's never about the money. You got to do what you love, and then the money comes. You know what I mean? Like, don't really get caught up in what's the salary going to be and what's that. Because you can make $1 million and not like what you're doing. So I personally would go after the love of what it is that I love, and then watch the money flow. That's how I do.
Well, I've already found the love. That's why I'm here. I'm here for the love. Now I want the money.
The money will come. That's what I hear.
I'm in love already.
At the end of the day, think about this whole degree process. It's meant to be transformational.
Right.
Okay? You're going from a caterpillar to a butterfly, kind of thing. It's that metamorphosis that occurs, during this process that ultimately, makes you into something that maybe you weren't before. That, in this particular case, you're refining a whole bunch of skills that you maybe never really had, or you never really understood, or you never knew about. And some of it comes incrementally. But also there's some of it that's like a fire hose, being sprayed out at you, and you're just trying to absorb as much as you possibly can without, drowning. Right. But that's just the nature of the beast. If you came in every single week and you were never challenged, you were just sitting there, and there's never. What are you really getting out of that? It's whenever you go home at the end of the day and your head hurts, and to the point of and then you start dreaming about discounted cash flow or, due diligence or tax code or whatever, then you know that it's starting to take hold.
Oh, it's starting.
What?
It's
starting?
I liked how we went from small entrepreneurial, or at least we started with entrepreneurial. We went bigger in the second presentation. Something larger where someone may use more knowledge base and risk and their own capital. And then
that was
back to
purposeful.
and
Because in my mind, the whole thing is you need to understand there are many different forms of opportunities, whether it's, once again, working for someone else while you're doing your own thing, working completely on your own, you know, working for a commission, working for a fee, working for the upside in a deal, whatever it is, earning just, you know, a salary. You know, you need to understand that, you know, there are a wide variety of options that are available to you, and so the whole idea is to kind of show you that, so that you can then begin to think about your own future and say,
where do I fit
yeah,
in?
where do I fit in? What am I comfortable with? What works for me? And so then you hear enough of these kind of quote-unquote origin stories, you know, at some point, okay, you've heard it and you've heard the same story over and over and over again, and by that point, okay, now you're hopefully ready to feel, have that comfort level to say, well, okay, I've heard enough of these folks say this is how they got their start, here's how they did it, now it's time for me on my own to sort of figure it out and take that next step.
I feel like being in the program and going through not just the pain of doing everything and learning what you need to know, having the reality check of these people telling us what it is that you do and you don't do, and then, you know, it just makes it a whole learning experience, you know, back to reality, you know, besides
Yeah, it's
being
meant
involved.
to be experiential.
Right.
It's meant to, you know, so that you're immersed, you know, in what's actually sort of happening. You know, it's the whole idea behind why do I insist that you go to these conferences, that you meet with these different people, that you have that interaction while you're, you know, in the program, going through the program. You know, it's not meant to inflict some sort of torture. You know, it's the idea is that hopefully at some point you become more comfortable with those sorts of things to where it's becomes second nature.
Yeah, something that caught my attention was what Pike said about know your DNA. Like, what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? What's your niche? What, you know, what is it that you feel
Absolutely.
like that where you're going? Because when I started the program, I had no idea. You know, I was in love, like he said, but I didn't know which way to go, and now I have a little bit more of a...
Everybody has a different
idea
temperament
what I
whenever it
want
comes
to do.
to these sorts of things. I mean, I will be the first to admit to you, I absolutely hate property management. Me personally. You know, I don't have anything against property managers, that's not what I'm saying. Me being a property manager, having owned property and having to deal with tenants, whether they're commercial tenants, residential tenants, that is not my, you know, strength at all, okay? You know, I'm not a people person, okay, whenever it comes to that sort of thing, okay?
With me, it's financials. Like, I'm not
When you
about
learn, you don't
spreadsheets.
like it, that's good.
No, absolutely, and it's the sort of thing that, you know, you don't want me as a property manager, you know? I mean, I am the kind of guy, I don't want to be called at 2 o'clock in the morning to tell, you know, that your toilet's clogged or that someone's jumped off the building or, you know, whatever has happened. That's not the guy that I want to be, you know? I like the deal structures, I like putting together the deals, I like finding the deals and, you know, getting in and out, you know, that's the sort of thing that appeals to me. You know, I'm not the long-term buy and hold sort of guy either, you know, because to me, you know, there are opportunities there, don't get me wrong, but I just don't have the patience, you know, to constantly be, you know, because every piece of property that I would own, I would stay awake worrying about what's happening with that property at any given moment. So it's kind of like the more properties I own, the higher alert status, you know, and you know, to the point of it would just drive me nuts. But you know, doing the deal, getting it done, moving on, that was, you know, for me, it works because I'm a very much of a project-oriented mindset but everyone is wired differently in that respect. Okay, other thoughts, comments, observations?
I'll kind of add to Quincy's point. I do like the entrepreneurial kind of presentations. I mean, they're all beneficial, but it's nice to hear like a Rag Richard story and how someone from the bottom made it to the top, and to really realize you don't need much to get started. I mean, that to me,
Yeah, a certain base level of understanding, a certain base intelligence, and that thirst to you know, really be you know, able to go out there and find that opportunity and make it work for you. No, absolutely. Okay. Other thoughts, comments, observations before we move on? Okay.
Yeah, since starting this program, I think I'm taking all the training wheels in terms of how I'm doing things. I've learned about Dropbox. And you know, it's great because you're out there, you need to give people documents, and that really helped me. What was significant yesterday, I got a call. Look, I used to have problems collecting and people paying on time. And since we in this program, I went in and talked to this banker and everything, and I interviewed him. First time I ever did anything like that. But cut a story short, he helped me set up something that I just give 4 numbers, and they go and pay. And then I have another account we can get swept into and take care of that. So went talked with somebody. Oh, Brad wants to talk with you. Brad? Oh yeah, that's Brad. He's the vice president. So he called me back and said, oh Carol, those deals, don't put them together, or think twice. Because when you put them together, if you need to sell one, it's going to be linked to the other one. And he was explaining something to me that I wouldn't have even gotten into that realm until I reached into a problem. So I'm building my team, and I think this project, this course, is really putting me where I'm getting my money's worth. You know, I've met individuals in here I've definitely do things with, so I'm getting what I need.
Good, good. Okay, all right, well, let's jump on in then to one of the topics I want to talk about. I didn't get a chance to talk about this in Mark Trowan's class. I did send you this spreadsheet already. You may or may not have looked at it. And I've made a copy of it to kind of go through and to talk about some of these issues. And actually our most recent speaker brought up the whole idea of green buildings and kind of the energy efficiency sort of thing. This is one of those sorts of topics. This is not a new thing. I mean, the whole LEED certification thing, yeah, within the past 15, 20 years, that is a relatively new thing. But the whole idea of trying to be, efficient with your resources, there's nothing inherently new about that. It's just being kind of repackaged, into something a little bit different. Well, part of the problem that has existed, and it's a fundamental structural problem that has existed in the real estate industry for pretty much at least, since buildings started obviously leasing out to tenants, is who pays the electric bill? Who pays the water bill? Who pays the gas bill? Who pays those bills? Well, most commercial properties, who pays that bill? The tenant. Okay? And the information about a building's performance in terms of its energy efficiency, a lot of that information really hasn't been available in the sense of being able to tell a tenant, my building is really efficient, and therefore you're going to have a lower electric bill because I have taken all these steps to make it more energy efficient. Does that make sense?
Isn't that CAM though? Wouldn't you tell them that in the CAM price?
If you have a historical operating record. But if it's a brand new building, you may not have any sort of operating history to be able to go off of to be able to present that. And even with the CAM, it's a question of, are they going to take the time historically? And once again, this is an evolutionary sort of process. Historically, a lot of those tenants would just kind of make the assumption every building is basically the same, in terms of its energy efficiency and that sort of thing. And it's only been within recent history, especially with escalating, energy cost, that, and especially in areas that are going to require more heating or cooling or, whatever it might be, that people begin to kind of wake up and realize, hey, this is an issue. You can have some serious cost savings if you, do a few things to make the building more energy efficient. But part of the restriction or part of the barrier to that happening was the traditional response by the development community in saying, why do I care about any of that? I'm not the one that's going to be paying the utility bill. It's the tenant. I'm passing through all of that to the tenant. And so why would I want to spend extra money up front as a developer putting in an energy efficient air conditioner or low-E glass on the exterior of the building, or as Craig mentioned, white roofs instead of black roofs, to obviously reflect the sun instead of absorb it. So, and that argument held for years. And it's only been within the past few years that more tenants have been sort of saying, hey, we realize that you can make a difference up front as a developer by putting these things into place, and one way that you can
verify that to us is by getting, you know, LEED certification as maybe LEED silver or gold or the ultimate of platinum, or just plain LEED certified, to at least demonstrate that you've made some commitment in that direction. Okay, does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
But, you know, there's still plenty of tenants out there, especially, you know, the mom and pop or local tenants that, you know, may only need a few hundred or a few thousand square feet, that aren't paying attention to that. You know, that are just simply saying, well, once again, I'm just going to go locate in this office building or this, you know, shopping center, and then the reality of it is, it's, you know, is it really going to make that much of a difference in my bottom line of how much that I'm going to have to spend on the utility bill? But, you know, what has happened are those larger tenants are finally paying attention to that sort of information and are being more aggressive in that stance. One of the other things that has taken place is that if you are the owner-occupant of a building, you tend to pay attention to this a lot more, because from that standpoint, as a developer of your own building, what should you be concerned with? The long-term operating costs, okay? And what is interesting, some of the early adopters in terms of energy efficiency and kind of this whole mindset, believe it or not, were nonprofits and local governments. Any idea why?
That's the only thing they pay for.
Well, to a certain extent, you're right. But think about this. If I'm a nonprofit, for example, I'm building whether it's a nonprofit hospital or a nonprofit school or a nonprofit, you know, whatever that use is, how do I usually get the money to build the building up front? A lot of times through donations, right? Or churches even, okay? You get the money up front, you know, through donations. Well, it's easy to raise money for a nonprofit in terms of donations to build a building, because everybody wants to give to building the building, yes? It is extremely difficult to raise money for ongoing operating costs, okay? So if you can get more money up front and build basically a building that's going to consume very little energy and have very low operating cost, you would want to do that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And that's precisely what happened in a lot of cases. And then you began to, I think, having more people take notice of that and say, well, if these guys are willing to spend that much more money and get this LEED Platinum certification to have virtually this, you know, building that doesn't require very little outside sort of energy consumption, then, you know, maybe we ought to start paying attention to this. And so what is now finally beginning to take place in some markets is that utility information is becoming more public, okay? In a lot of markets, it's still very secret, okay, in the sense the utility company will not allow the, like, property by property information to be made public, okay? That they've, you know, deemed that information to be private in nature, okay? I mean, you think that there's a lot of public information out there about property. I mean, you obviously can go down and find out who owns a property or what their property taxes are, are they delinquent on their property taxes, what a property sold for, that sort of thing. But trying to get like utility information is a totally different thing. In most instances, you almost have to go directly to the owner in order to get those records in a lot of cases, except in certain cities where they have started to basically make that information public. Well, what happens is once that information is made public, and you have folks creating these wonderful databases, but like a geographic information system where you can go in and literally see, almost building by building, what would be the operating cost per square foot, and then get, you know, a much better idea of, well, here's what's going to be my operating cost. Therefore, I, as a prospective tenant, would have access to that sort of information and then be able to determine, you know, kind of apples to apples comparison of occupying a building that is not energy efficient versus occupying one that is, and what's going to be the total occupancy cost that I'm going to incur as a tenant of that property. Does that make sense? Okay. Any thoughts, comments, observations about that?
I was going to say that form-based codes like Miami 21 is now stipulating for office and condo buildings LEED silver.
And they should.
And so
well, some cities have actually gone so far as, like in Vancouver, Canada, they require all new buildings to be gold, LEED gold. Many government buildings within the U.S., depending on the government agency, are required to be LEED gold. And, you know, because there is that mindset, Once again, you know, we can spend a little bit of extra money up front, we're gonna have all this savings on the back end, you know, whenever it comes to paying those utility bills, okay? Other thoughts, comments? Yep.
FPL is changing. I know because I just did there was a meeting where FPL is sponsoring a small big business tool that gives businesses an idea of where they could potentially put their stuff at based on utility rates. But they go far beyond. They actually it's a great tool for developers because they give you all kinds of tools as far as what the comps are in the area. I'm gonna have to look it up, but the point is that FPL wants to make this more public so that they can.
Yeah, and you would think that would be counterintuitive because you would think, okay, well, doesn't the utility company want me to use more electricity because they would make more money? Well, part of it is, it's not that. Part of it is they don't want to build more power plants, okay? Because, you know, it's not as simple as, okay, we're gonna go build another power plant, you know, from the standpoint that they can't necessarily increase the capacity of an existing power plant. You have to go build in a large
distribution system.
Yeah, and you know, build another one that, you know, and the cost is huge. And so it's like, let's be sensible about this, and you know, and say, well, what if we can get everybody to save 10% overall on their energy consumption through, you know, LED lighting or whatever, you know, the situation is, then that means we don't have to build another power plant or another water processing plant or, you know, whatever, you know, the case is. You know, those of you that are going to be going on the study tour, one of the things that you'll be seeing in each of the 3 locations is all 3 of these locations, Key West, Cozumel, and Grand Cayman, have one central common issue: water. They're surrounded by it, but in terms of fresh water, not so much.
Not potable.
You know, in the case of like Key West, their water, did you know this? Doesn't come from Key West.
Right.
It is pumped through basically, you know, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not a pipeline. A pipeline, you know, basically from Miami, you know, a couple hundred miles to Key West. Okay? Yeah. So that in and of itself is a constraint because that pipeline is only so big. So if they grow beyond a certain level, they're not going to have enough water. Okay, so you follow what I'm sort of getting at. So now, obviously, as technology may change and we may be able to produce, you know, desalination plants at a much lower cost, then that issue may, you know, sort of resolve itself. But until that point in time, you've got an issue there. Okay, all right. So with that, let's kind of jump into this discussion. And what this is a little spreadsheet that I built a couple of years ago that does a fairly simple comparison using a few key variables that you're going to have between kind of an ordinary building and a highly energy efficient building. Now, are these numbers precise? No, in the sense of if I go and get the precise cost and that sort of thing, it's meant to be more of an illustrative model of potentially what happens if you change this or you change this, what is the effect, okay? So each one of these cells that's highlighted in yellow is effectively an input cell, one that you can change. The ones that are not highlighted, obviously, are calculation cells where, you know, the numbers are being added, subtracted, divided, whatever it might be to come up with a result. And over here, this simply tells kind of a percentage difference so that you can get kind of a comparison that, well, maybe as I increase my building construction cost by 12.5%, how is that maybe going to flow down in terms of my rate of return? Okay, does that make sense? All right, so the first assumption, and it's probably a fairly accurate assumption, the ordinary building, let's say, is going to cost us $200 a square foot to construct, and we're saying with a highly energy efficient building, another 25 bucks a square foot or 12.5% of construction cost. Now, what is that going to entail? That may be, you know, everything I sort of mentioned of, you know, effectively having maybe energy efficient windows, energy efficient lighting, you know, energy efficient HVAC systems, you know, all of that taken in tandem potentially may drive up your cost a little bit. Okay, make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, moving down.
When you say highly, would you mean platinum or gold?
Generically speaking, all right. Okay? The square footage, in this case, we're wanting an apples to apples comparison, so we're leaving that obviously the same for both. We're allowing the land acquisition cost to be the same of 150. But then down here, I put this in as, you know, something that, you know, you certainly need to think about. In a number of cases, you have local government or state government or federal government incentives for developing energy efficient buildings, okay? And every jurisdiction is different, okay? In Texas, we had all different sorts of initiatives offered, in some cases by the utility companies, that said, if you will put in this top of the line, highly efficient air conditioning system, we will give you a cash rebate of X number of dollars. Or you put in this low-E, you know, sort of exterior glass, we will also give you effectively, you know, some sort of a rebate on that. So, or some sort of a tax credit that might be applied to your local property taxes or federal or state income tax or business tax, or, you know, there could be, that form of rebate can come in a variety of different ways, okay, is all I'm saying. And so in this case, I just simply said, well, by doing this, you're going to get effectively a $500,000 rebate. Now, what you will see, though, once again, the only difference we've got is the construction cost. So did that $500,000 completely pay for all of these improvements? No. Because the total building cost is still, you know, a couple $1 million more for the highly energy efficient one than it is, you know, for obviously the ordinary one. It defrayed $500,000 worth of the cost, but certainly didn't make it equal, okay? Everybody cool with that? Okay. And that's the thing that you've got to understand about a lot of those incentives. It's not going to pay, usually, not going to pay for, you know, the whole thing. It's just meant to kind of help defray some of the costs. Okay, now we move down the page a little bit. Okay, now we get into the project financing. Okay, here you go to a bank and you say to the bank, all right, I've got this energy efficient building versus this ordinary building that I want to finance. Now historically, a lot of the banks would have just looked at you and said, so what? Okay, you know, who cares? Okay, I don't care, you know. But what has happened is there has, you know, been even a transformation within the banking industry of where they realize now more than they did, maybe not every single banker, but more bankers today than certainly 10 years ago, that there's going to be a difference. And the difference that they should care about with an energy efficient building is you're going to have lower operating costs, okay, in terms of, even though the property owner is not necessarily paying the utility bill and the tenant is, the bank is effectively saying, well, where does the money come from to pay the rent? The tenants. So in one sense, the tenants are going to have more money because they're having to pay total occupancy cost. You follow me? Okay? So they might be willing to loan you a higher loan-to-value ratio. Okay? All right? Now we're keeping the term the same, but then in the interest rate, they might say, once again, because this is an energy efficient building, because the operating costs are lower, because you've made this, you know, more significant investment up front, we're going to give you a little bit of a lower interest rate. Okay? Now, is it going to be massive? No, but it might be enough to, once again, as it flows all the way through, that's the whole idea behind this sort of an analysis, is to try to see from the top all the way to the bottom, what is the flow-through effect, okay? All right, then we move on down. Another key sort of financial variable, the debt service coverage ratio, okay? Here, we've got a 1.4 versus a 1.25. What that's implying is, with this 1.25, the lender, once again, is basically making that implicit assumption that the cash flow is going to be potentially more stable, but more specifically, you're going to have fewer expenses, therefore they don't need as much of a cushion between basically the operating income and the annual debt service, okay? Then we move on down, and this is, well, one of the key things that clearly is going to be looked at, the total operating expenses as a percentage of effective gross income. Right, with an ordinary building, we're sort of saying 35% operating cost versus with the energy efficient building being 25%. Okay, so obviously lower. Okay, we keep going. One of the things that has been borne out in the research over the past several years is that vacancy and collection losses for energy efficient buildings tends to be lower. Because what's beginning to happen is, what I was saying earlier, tenants are beginning to take notice of the fact that their operating costs are lower, therefore they're migrating effectively with their feet, going to the buildings that are more energy efficient up front, leaving the ones that are less efficient effectively behind, and as those leases expire in those less energy efficient buildings, they're having difficulty maybe getting released unless they take the time and effort to potentially renovate and make them more efficient, which there may be, you know, once again, an entrepreneurial opportunity there in and of itself.
What percentage of office space currently would you say?
Very small. Very small percentage overall. I mean, in terms of the, now when I say that, there's very small percentage that have gotten LEED certification. That does not mean, however, the percentage is small in them actually taking initiatives to make their buildings more energy efficient, because the cost of LEED certification is not free. Okay, for, you know, even a relatively small office building of maybe, you know, 10 to 50,000 square feet, you may have $50,000 to $100,000 of cost just to get it LEED certified. Okay, because of all the documentation that you have to go through. But that doesn't preclude you, though, as the owner of that property, to obviously make many of the same technology choices and the, you know, the infrastructure that goes into that building and pay them more money up front. But then you've got to take the time to probably better educate the prospective tenant to say, we have done this, even though we didn't get LEED certification, we have done this to make our properties more energy efficient. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So, all of that having been said, then what we sort of see down here in the bottom line, you're sort of saying, well, wait a second. My before tax cash flow divided by equity investors, or before tax return on equity, also kind of cash on cash return, you kind of call it a few different things, is really not that significantly different between the two. So why should I do this? Take a look at something else up here. No, hold on. Take a look at something else. That rate of return, though, is based on what? Equity investment.
Much higher.
Oh.
Look up here.
Much lower.
Yes, you have a lot lower equity investment. So in other words, less cash out of pocket with the energy efficient building than with the, obviously, the non-energy efficient building. So even though that return down there is kind of misleading, because the reality of it is you've actually got to put less cash of your own into this deal in order for it to work.
That works as a general standpoint too, right? Just that if you were to put less, or if you were to put less cash in and borrow more money, you'd have a higher return.
So this is, as I said, this is meant to be kind of just a simple foundational worksheet, okay? That you can then go in, try to get the real information about a project that you're wanting to compare, or, you know, this, in other words, just sort of saying, do we want to go through whatever process that we have to go through to make this property more efficient? Is it really going to pan out for us in any possible conceivable way? You know, this is the type of model that you could employ to basically be able to prove that case or disprove it.
You think the benefit really comes from the finance, or does it come from the benefit of you being able to tell your tenant that you're not going to have to be paying as much?
It's both. I mean, it's why I didn't limit this model to one key variable. You know, you really have to take into, you know, consideration every single one of those pieces in order to not just, you know, make a sort of a blanket statement of, yeah, more energy efficient buildings are going to get me higher rent and lower occupancy. This at least kind of helps to sort of show and hopefully in relatively real time what would happen. Okay? Yep.
Let's just say this was like a for sale property, you just for a flip. When it comes to cap rates, I mean, when you're doing a LEED certified or sustainable building, I mean, the cap rate is lower for that.
Theoretically, yes. Yeah, it should be. And see, and now you brought that up because it's a case that you have to make. You know, if you have made this sort of investment in this energy efficient building, don't make the assumption that everyone is going to reward you for that automatically. You know, you're going to have to a certain extent, at least until it becomes completely common practice, you're going to have to fight for each of these things. You follow what I'm sort of saying? But in other words, you know, going to the lender, you know, up front and saying, look, here are what my projected operating expenses are going to be compared to what they would be if I had done it normally. You've got to sell the lender on that. You've got to sell a prospective buyer as well, whenever they're looking, you know, to sort of say, yeah, you should be willing to give me, you know, a lower cap rate, you know, in the sense on the sale of this property, because it will make more money for you per dollar invested. Okay? Other thoughts, comments, observations?
Well, I just want to mention that I have the opportunity to do 2 rehabs and then 1 new project, and then there's another organization that also certify a green standard, and it's called Home Innovation Research Labs. And then what I guess the point that I wanted to make is there are different entities, and then each one has their own limitations and advantages and prices. But definitely what we do it is because we have seen through history the real value in operating expenses, and there are now entities that you can chop and then get your costs down to get certified, but the value is always gonna be excellent in the cost of the community.
No, I agree. There are many other organizations, as you mentioned, many other organizations other than the U.S. Green Building Council, which does the LEED certification. And some of them are fine, but you know, it's been the industry standard for the most part. You know, a lot of the others, they tend to usually focus on 1 or 2 areas, like Energy Star is another. You know, with Energy Star, effectively, you know, it's really kind of just boiling down to your utilities, and that's pretty much it. Not a lot of the other stuff that the LEED certification tends to take into account, which, you know, maybe, you know, recycled materials that you use, you know, in your construction process, or, you know, are these sourced from, you know, renewable resources? You know, are you considering the fact that some of your employees are now going to be able to bike into work, and you're going to have, you know, showers there for them to be able to use, and, you know, is it, I mean, pedestrian friendly and all that other sort of stuff that LEED certification may take into account, whereas, you know, some of the others, you know, may just strictly be based on the energy consumption piece. So, you know, and to a certain extent, that's what this model is really focused on, is really kind of, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
You know, not, to a certain extent, a lot of the other sort of less quantifiable kind of environmental issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not that those aren't important, but sometimes those are very difficult to quantify and very difficult to sell to a prospective developer, tenant, whoever it might be. You know, yeah, everyone wants to, you know, be great and environmentally responsible, but at the end of the day, you know, they want a return that makes sense. Okay? Anybody else? No other comments, thoughts, observations on this one? Yes, ma'am.
In the construction class, we had to watch a video that had, you know, I guess it was talking about the construction of a transportation building in California, and it was a, you know, it was for the state of California. And they went step by step in the construction process and how they did the high efficiency building. And they talked about the waterless toilets,
yep,
and all these things that I never thought about. You know, all this new innovation.
And some of which work and some of which don't.
Right.
You know, like the waterless toilets, I mean, most people will tell you, no. I mean, I've visited, you know, a number of properties that have had them, and in almost every single instance, that was their biggest regret, because, you know, the smell, to be blunt.
Yeah, even though it has a
Dolphin Stadium uses them now.
And, but now let me back up and sort of say this. The ones that they made,
They're
okay,
evolved into better
they've evolved
ones.
to a certain extent that now a number of the properties will use rainwater to actually, to perform that function, as opposed to just the idea of just completely waterless or composting toilets or
And
whatever other.
the AC unit, the AC had a cooling system that worked at night, and then during the night it froze, like you would have ice and freeze the water, and then it would work in the day. So it would save energy all throughout. It was pretty interesting. Everything, I mean, the glass they use, everything they use in building.
Well, let me tell you, here's one of my most, to me, one of the most interesting stories of where we visited a property. This was in the year 2000, when I was teaching at Texas A&M. We took a group of our students to Australia to a place was called Curran Cove Resort. It's like a 5-star resort. And I've told the story in other classes, but I'll tell you in this one. We went down there, a group of about 15 students, and these guys were super innovators. I mean, in terms of all the different things that they had done to save energy and decrease energy consumption all across the board. And once again, a 5-star resort. But one of the things that they had done that I was personally most fascinated with was, at the time, they had installed monitoring systems for all of the water, all the electricity, and you could watch in real time in your room on the TV screen how much water you were using. If you flushed a toilet, you would see the gallons, effectively rotating on the screen. You would effectively, open the refrigerator or, do whatever, and you would see, or turn on the air conditioner, and you would see in real time what your energy consumption was. Well, that was cool. Don't get me wrong, that was super cool.
FPL has that now.
The what?
FPL has that now.
Okay. And I think there's a lesson just in that. But let me finish the story, because I do believe that if you saw in real time, minute by minute, whenever you flip on a light switch or you turn on the air conditioner in your own home, and you really honestly saw, here is my electric bill going up, you would probably be a bit more conservative with, the energy consumption. I have no doubt about that. But this was what was interesting. So this particular resort, they thought, well, let's take this to the next level. We're all about being an eco resort. We're all about saving energy. We're all about, educating, the people that are coming here about the energy that they're consuming and yada, yada, yada. So what they did is they started, when they opened up, they started this whole thing of, for the least consuming person, they would get the room for free. Well, it was like, $500 a night, to stay in this place, okay? And so you get your room for free if you were the least consuming, customer. So basically, everybody would go around in this 5-star resort, not flushing their toilets, not taking showers, not watching TV, not, turning on the air conditioner, but it was.
Did you win it like that night, or was it like?
It was like, the day after sort of thing, yeah.
So it was like one person every month.
No, it was like one every night kind of thing. And it was very successful. It shaved, lots of money off of their operating expenses, but you had a lot of dirty, smelly people, walking around a 5-star resort. But what was interesting, this was the part that made me sick to my stomach. So I guess it was in 2011, 2012, about 10, 12 years later, I took another group of my students down there. Actually Kevin Hogan, who teaches, the Argus class, he was one of my students at the time, working on his master's or PhD. And we went down there, checked into the resort, and I get to the room and turn on the TV because I want to see this system. And I'm like, where is it? Why is it not here? So I go back, I go to the main desk, and I said, well, I was here like 10 years ago, and you had this wonderful system of doing all this monitoring and everything. Yeah, we got rid of that. And I was like, why? Well, because the system was not compatible with our new on-demand movie system in our rooms, and we made more money off of the movies than we did off the cost savings on the even though, once again, it was substantial. Don't get me wrong, it was substantial, But because think about it, this was a 5-star resort located out in the middle of, you had to take a boat to get to it, okay? So it's not like you can walk, you know, and go shopping or anything. This is a place that you come to decompress and so on-demand movies, that would be an important thing, okay? So it was very disheartening to me to come there and they had gotten rid of that system, or they still have the system, but it wasn't operational as a result of this new system. Anyway, so that was that. All right.
So,
yep.
I was thinking about that 400,000 square foot office that you referred to this morning that they're going to demolish. And I was thinking that should have a lot of material that they could repurpose for Habitat for Humanity or something like that.
And in a perfect world, yes, and maybe you know there is some opportunity for that. Unfortunately, sometimes the systems that are in place to allow that to happen are not as cost efficient as just simply knocking it down and having the rubble removed. I mean, you know, there are folks that do go and will salvage a lot of materials, you know, before, yeah, but in some cases it's almost just too cost prohibitive to allow them to live, and time intensive to allow them to go and to do that, sadly. Yep.
Isn't it not safe a lot of the time, like the big dig?
And yeah, in a lot of cases, it's not just not safe from like a structural standpoint, but also not safe from a standpoint of, you know, especially depending on the age of the building, with asbestos or, you know, other contaminated types of materials that, you know, you never quite know, and as a result, you know, they don't want to have the liability maybe associated with allowing it to be effectively deconstructed piece by piece. Okay, all right, other thoughts, questions?
There's this hotel somewhere, and what they're saying is that they have to be they move the kitchen section and they're moving parts of the hotel and keep moving it back. Because each year the water is raising so high that what used to be grassland now it's just some beach, and they put mangroves and different things, but the water level is rising so high. And they're saying there's so many, a couple glaciers in Greenland, the rate at which they're melting, how many kilometers of the elevation. I'm saying climate change is a real thing. It's affecting some people, not just in savings, but they're losing where they're living.
True.
You know, and they're saying some of these islands are the least offenders of affecting global climate change.
But
and the cost now because they're going to be refugees pretty soon at the rate of that. I was thinking, shouldn't the developed countries be the one to take those people or
in a perfect world, absolutely, but you know, unfortunately, you know, unless there's some sort of a government initiative to probably move us in that direction, probably not. So, but you know, your point about hotels, though, or just continuing this conversation just for a moment about hotels with regard to energy efficiency, they, to a certain extent, have been some of the more early adopters as it relates to this, because typically hotels are owner occupants. Okay, because usually it doesn't, you don't usually build a hotel and then effectively allow a hotel chain to effectively lease the premises from you. You know, you may have a flag that you fly for Holiday Inn or Ramada or Marriott or Hilton or whoever, but they're, you know, usually they're going to want to own the property, or if they franchise it, they're going to hold you to certain standards. But the interesting thing to sort of point out is that because they are typically, you know, owner occupants, they are typically going to pay a lot of attention to that, because reducing those operating costs can be, you know, huge to improving their bottom line. You know, it's why, you know, many of the hotels now, they really do make it a point of, you know, saying, can, you know, we not have to change out your towels every single day or your sheets every single day, or can you, whenever you leave the room, we're going to have these key card things that you're going to, it's going to turn off all the power to the room whenever you leave, or, you know, whatever it is to try to, you know, do what they can to lower the overall operating cost of the property, because, you know, they realize how important that is to the overall bottom line of the property.
Yeah, when I was in Thailand, I stayed at like 15 different places. Every single place when you went into the room, they only give you one key. and it's the only way you can get power and AC to the room.
Yeah.
There wasn't one place, one of the places I stayed was even really nice, it was like a Marriott, and they still didn't even have that.
Won't work without the key in there.
Yeah.
Without the key,
Yeah.
you won't have any AC or electric.
Even if you open the screen door, the AC shuts down,
Yeah.
because they don't want you with the door open, and the AC.
Well, they're trying to, I mean, and it makes sense. They're trying to control your behavior to a certain extent to, you know, minimize their operating costs. I mean, it makes logical sense, but, you know, certain things like that, you know, we, you know, because every industry, to a certain extent, you know, has begun to embrace more aggressively a lot of these efficiencies. I mean, all we have to do is to look at industries like the airline industry. You know, what have they done? You know, charge you for virtually every single bag that you carry on, and, you know, before long, you know, like some airlines in the South Pacific, you know, charging you by how much you weigh. You know, so, you know, if you're a little bit overweight, well, you're going to pay more than if you're, you know, some person that you know, only weighs, you know, 70 pounds.
I think eventually all industries will, but to get to that point, it's just not pragmatic to just implement something like that right now at this point.
But it causes a lot of disruption. There's no question about it. You know, and all of these things that are happening, you know, at a very fast pace that are, you know, influencing, you know, the real estate industry, and, you know, because we have to, you know, and a lot of our speakers have, you know, kind of handed around it, you know, some of these things, you know, Tony Trello brought up some of these points, but, you know, people, I mean, I remember, you know, I was teaching, you know, in 1994, whenever, you know, we got our first email addresses, you know, and I remember this, you know, very vividly, because we went into class, and the student says, well, you know, what's your email address? And I was like, what? You know, but the interesting thing was, I remember having these discussions, you know, even back then at the early days of the internet, you know, about the whole online shopping thing, and, you know, all the resistance, you know, that people had about the online shopping, you know, kind of environment. And, you know, now, you know, you've got people that are hooked on it. I mean, you know, Rebecca is probably one of the most online shopping I've ever seen.
I don't know what you guys all think of me, but I'm free shopping for the sales. That's all I'm saying.
But the
They say there right now.
But the point is that, you know, you think about that whole industry, I mean, what that is doing to the traditional bricks and sticks retailers. You know, I mean, it really is beginning to have an impact. Because you've got major shopping malls across the country that are shutting down, you know, because of the impact. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. I am one of these guys. I am an Amazon believer, okay? I am the guy who orders virtually every single thing I possibly can to be shipped to my front door, so that the only time I have to go to the grocery store, it's pretty much get fresh meats and vegetables and things like that. But otherwise, if it's paper or canned or plastic or whatever, it's coming to my front door, okay? And, you know, but, you know, not everybody is quite as an extremist on that as I am, but the point being is that evolutionary process, you know, as it begins to take hold, you know, your behavior begins to change, you know, with things like that. And, you know, at first, you know, maybe those few early adopters that sort of get into it, you know, and you really don't think it's going to have that much of an impact, but then once you begin to realize that virtually everybody is doing it to some level, I mean, like, for example, your textbooks, okay? How many of you bought your textbooks from the actual bookstore? Anybody?
There's one. One. Where is
You know, as opposed to, no, but as opposed to getting on Amazon, you know, where you can have it normally delivered within, you know, a day or two. For free. For free. Or certainly, you know, and usually at a much lower cost.
Yeah. And you can bargain shop too. Like, you can go into different sites and find the cheapest one you can get.
Yeah.
Same book.
And okay, let me take Rebecca a comment.
Well, because I remember what that lady was saying at that Evil Eye Latin one about how now stores are more about the experience, and I totally like agreed with her. Yes, I like shop online all the time, but when I do go to stores, like I'll go into Nordstrom's and I'll be like, this is what I'm doing, tell me what to buy. And literally, like, I like going into stores and having the ladies tell me what to buy instead of me like wasting my time like looking for something, and I'm like, this is what I wear, this is what I do, and they're just giving me options, and that's why I go to stores. Otherwise, yeah, I just sit online and do it.
But there's a lot of shoppers.
What?
There's an article about 2 months ago. There's an article about 2 months ago, I think it was Camden, yeah, it was Camden,
Yeah.
And they basically put a stop to all parcels being delivered to their properties because it's becoming a nightmare.
Yeah.
They showed a picture of their back room, and
Yeah.
it was ridiculous. It was just stacked with different
No,
packages.
you're absolutely right, because a lot of properties, that has become a massive issue. When you think about it, if virtually all of your tenants are doing that and having these boxes delivered, they've got to not only store them somewhere, but then disperse them, over the course of the day. It's like a full-time job for somebody to actually deal with it.
Package, then they may be becoming a burden to the management.
And while we're briefly on the topic, because I want to, for those of you that are going to be taking, this is a perfect case in point, you're going to be taking the real estate finance course in the spring. The new edition of the book has just come out. If you hop on Amazon or you go to the bookstore right now, the cost of this new edition, $280, okay? You can get the most recent edition prior to that, the 14th edition, for well under $100, okay? And I have taken the time, literally page by page, to see if there's any substantial difference. There is one new chapter that's been added that's not really worth a flip, and the rest of it is identical. So don't spend the extra money to get the brand new edition, because while I was thinking about that, I wanted to...
14th will suffice.
14th will suffice.
Could you send us an email with the ISBN, is that possible?
Yep. Okay. Somebody had a comment over here.
So would you potentially, if you were going to be doing some new construction, invest in warehouse space?
I think warehouse space and residential make the most sense. I think office space, they've got their own issues. Much like, we took the tour of the Axis space, back in the development class, and you saw that whole, the idea of the co-working, and even like Craig mentioned today. I mean, he pretty much works out of his home. So it's a question of, yeah, you have certain users that probably will, I'm not going to say always need office space, but there's certainly going to be a certain percentage of them. But can you really count on the demand being the same 5 years from now for office space per worker as what it was? I mean, once again, even 15, 20 years ago, the beginnings of this whole idea of office hoteling, was emerging, where effectively you had accounting firms that were saying, most of our accountants are actually out in the field working with clients on a regular basis. So what we're going to do is basically have like a little locker set up where they can kind of store their personal effects and that sort of thing at the office. But they're just going to basically have a hot desk that they can, plug into whenever they need to be in the office. And in the event that they need to meet with a client, we'll set them up with a nice corner office, beautiful furniture and windows and whatever else to make the nice impression. But otherwise, why do we need to spend all this extra money on renting out, basically, 100, 150, 200, whatever square feet per employee of office space? Okay, other thoughts?
Isn't that how like real estate offices are? Like
Well, yeah, but I mean, the point was that many more industries are able to do that now than ever before. I mean, quite frankly, there's really no reason for me to come to my office here on a regular, I do, but for the most part, I can handle virtually everything I need to do remotely. Yeah.
Telecommuting.
So, you really begin to think about, those two things, and those two uses, and it becomes very scary very quickly about, what is the real, need for those two uses, 5 to 10 years into the future. Residential, we've always got to have a place to live, okay? And the industrial, clearly if we're having everything delivered to us, from wherever, there needs to be storage space to accommodate that. So those two uses make a lot of sense to me, but along with that, on the residential side, clearly one of the things that some of your speakers have brought up is the whole idea that many of the millennials, for one reason or another, are saying, we want, maybe smaller apartments, but in, more walkable sort of areas where we can walk down to the local restaurant or bar or retail, whatever it is, entertainment venue, and, absorb what there is to be offered in that kind of an environment. If you would have said that, and I did, let's say 20 years ago, most of my students would have said, absolutely not. We want a white picket fence, we want a big truck, we want a big dog, we want a big yard, and that was, it was an absolute, necessity 20 years ago, Now, it's a whole different paradigm shift of people, saying, why do I need all that? Why do I want, to have all those things whenever I can, but once again, everybody's not the same, Some people still want that. That's granted, and you're probably going to, once again, always have a certain percentage, but is there enough of a fundamental shift, that is occurring, that is driving up the demand for those kind of properties? Because there was once, and get back to you here in a second, Frederick, a level of shame that was, whenever people would rent apartments, at one point in time in our, history, probably prior to the early 1990s, if you lived in an apartment, it was because you couldn't afford a house. Okay? And it was the whole idea of this renter by necessity. Now we have evolved into renter by choice. Because people are saying, I'm going to be potentially moving, every 2, 3, 4 years. So, why do I want to potentially buy a house, and live in that house for a couple of years only to move out and, move down the road? And so, but everybody's different in that respect. I personally, how many times have I moved? Well, I'm 47 years old and I probably have moved at least 20 times, probably every couple of years. Okay, I moved twice since I've been here in Florida. Okay, over 2 years. So the point being is, it's one of those sorts of things that every person is different as to what it is potentially they're looking for. Frederick.
No, I was just thinking, like, when we come up with this judgment about millennials and what they want, is it due to the fact of where they are in their life? I mean, if you got a house full of kids or dogs and stuff like that, you want to really live in an apartment? Are they at that stage in their life yet where they're really...
Well, the question is, that stage, has that stage been redefined? Because a lot of people are saying, well, do I really want to get married? Do I really want to have kids? Do I really want to have dogs? Do I really want to, or would I rather, spend my time traveling or doing something else?
Most of them don't even want a car.
So, okay.
Well, I read an article a few weeks ago aimed to, us millennials. And it was like all these post-grads that are like making this quote-unquote post-grad dormitory.
Right.
So it's like the mini studio apartments, but then they're gonna have common areas just like we would in, like, I don't know if it's like half of us don't want to leave college or what it is, but like they still want this like sense of community, like we still want this sense of community, and then like they still have like a little kitchen and like a little area, but they're gonna have a common, just like we would at like dorms.
Yeah, and see, the interesting, let's try to reconcile that with the, let's say, the old school model of, the traditional neighborhood, the traditional house. I think about, when I bought my first house in like 1991, I bought it in a traditional neighborhood, traditional neighbors and, the whole thing. And I said to myself, God, this is a boring place to live. There's nothing I can walk to, there's nothing I can do, and, is this really the environment that I really want to be in? And it was very quick after that I began to realize I'm an urban guy, I like to live in the city, sort of thing. And so, but to the point was, there was a time, when I grew up in the 1970s, I knew every single one of my neighbors, as a kid. I knew who they were, what they did, everything about them. But then but what was interesting to me was when I moved into that neighborhood, I really didn't want to get to know my neighbors. And it was just kind of like, I just don't feel like this is the place I really want to be. And most everybody else, I think, felt the same way about everybody else, because everybody pretty much would, take the garage door opener, pull into their garage would go down, they would never come outside. Even to do lawn maintenance, they would hire people to do lawn maintenance, so they were never outside their house, ever. And so, I make that point to basically say, we've gotten away from, that socialization aspect that occurred in a traditional, suburban neighborhood, to people, I think, still wanting some level of connection, possibly, and, then, does it evolve into this, idea of where you're going to have, shared facilities.
Like, parties in the building, like floor parties with, of course, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds like a great idea. But then you have this little micro space, and it's like.
So, but it's an evolution. And once again, is everybody going to buy into it? No. But is there going to be a demand? And I think that's the key, is trying to be able to figure out, well, what is potentially that next big thing or that next evolutionary step, you know, whether it's, you know, good or bad.
But my concern is it just cyclical? I mean, we're doing that now. We're going to do 20 years. Are we going to be back in the
Yeah, like what is it?
I don't think that's a cycle. I don't think that's a cycle, it's a trend. It's a trend.
Yeah, it's a trend, and it's a part of the market. It's not like everybody's gonna build student housing, you know.
These kids that are growing up, like the kids under me that are growing up, like on their phones and their iPads, like it's like, what are they gonna want? That's what I wonder. I'm sorry.
They're going to want a closet with no windows, so
Like, yeah, like they're literally like Wally, like they're gonna put on their phone all the time.
Free college.
As an elder in the community.
Get my grand.
I couldn't resist that one. But you know, it's interesting. They were saying that you cannot cross the same river twice. And no two kids grew up in the same home. Because an individual's experience shaped their whole perspective and everything. And Frederick, to answer your question, I think what basically we're saying, and individuals in business should understand, is that different generations have their patterns, things that happen that help to shape them, which flavors to a large extent a trend in how they react, but it's one thing across the board. But it makes a difference, and I've seen it looking back at the baby boomers do have a different attitude than their parents. And I can see where the Xers and others going down. There is a distinct difference.
Yeah, but what is this saying? There's nothing new under the sun. I've been living long enough to understand that. There's nothing new under the sun.
But I tell
We
you
lived
what.
downtown, we went to the suburbs. Fixed downtown,
But for different
we wanna go
reasons.
back downtown.
But for different reasons.
Okay.
You know, and I mean, you were in downtown originally because there wasn't the transportation system to allow you to be in the suburbs, but then once you had the transportation to take you out there, then the traffic was so nightmarish and all the restrictions that came with what could be placed out there in the sense of nothing to do in the suburbs, and people, you know, began to migrate back in the city and began to realize, well, why do I desire this white picket fence with the big yard, the big dog, and the big truck, and, you know, all that sort of stuff, you know, and have to maintain all that, because, you know, that was certainly one of the things that I found was I didn't want to have to take care of the yard, I didn't want to have to take care of the pool, I didn't want to have to clean the house, I didn't want to have to do all that sort of stuff. And so I was hiring all these people to do all this stuff, and I was just like, why? You know? So, you know, it's an evolution, you know, I think, in terms of you know, what those particular, you know, things are that are, you know, sort of driving a, you know, a difference in but you also have the issue with the millennials. Many of them are saddled with huge student debt. They can't maybe qualify for buying a house because of the cost associated with it. So there's that other component as well.
One of the guys from, I want to say it was JP Morgan Chase yesterday, was talking about how raising interest rates would actually be more beneficial because the problem that new home buyers are having isn't the interest payments, it's the actual down payment. So they'd actually have more income, interest income, coming in on a regular basis because when they raise interest rates, the banks are going to be giving more, wherever the money is, should be essentially collecting a little more. So that was his argument that it's, if you raise the interest rates, you'll stimulate the economy by now enabling people to have interest savings, make the down payment, because really the interest rate is so minimal on for a monthly payment that more people will be able to afford housing.
I think
That's the
that's
guy
a
who's
principle
making
in
money from the
arguing going
interest.
also.
All right, Laura?
But I think the whole
They make it easy to borrow.
argument is lifestyle. What is it that this particular community
True.
wants? The millennials want this, but the population is not only millennials. I mean,
Right.
there's different.
How do you spend your time? Think about this.
Lifestyle.
Okay, I did this, you know, for me personally, and I said to myself, okay, how was my life different 20 years ago? How did I spend my free time? My free time was spent going to bookstores, going to record stores, going to the video store, going to the library, going to you know, regular, you know, stores, going to the movie theater, going to, you know, all of these places. For the most part, they have all been completely replaced by online alternatives, for better or for worse.
Tell them Radio Shack.
No, but the point is, you know, you can can achieve the same thing by never having to leave your home. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that has become the reality. You know, and so it's like, how am I going to spend my free time? You know, is it going to be propped up in front of the TV, you know, watching endless shows and you know, or you know, is there going to be some other activity that takes place?
And the whole thing about the driverless cars, what Tony Trotta was talking about last time, it's gonna be the same thing as the internet. I think the driverless cars are gonna change retail and.
Oh, absolutely. Because think about it, you may not even have to have parking, or nearly as much parking, because the car can drop you off, it goes and self-parks, you know, blocks away, or whatever it might be.
Did you see that story yesterday where a cop saw?
Yeah.
Driverless cars. I was gonna say, you know, since self-driving cars are kind of becoming, you know, realistic, when you're applying, you know, for your building permits and showing your project to the city and everything, and they're saying, you know, you have to have this many specified parking spaces, could you, like, I wouldn't say argue with them, but could you talk to them and be like, you know, what if in 5, 7 years?
Until it becomes a reality, they're going to probably be hard pressed. But what is interesting is that more of the urban-based projects, they have lowered the requirements, kind of with that whole idea that there's not so much the driverless cars, but just that there's going to be, you know, more pedestrian, you know, sort of, you know, folks. So, or public transportation, or whatever it might be. But I mean, these are the kinds of issues that, you know, you've got to be thinking about, because if, I mean, the point being is, you know, if you're a developer like Craig Wiener, you know, who developed predominantly from the late 70s to, you know, let's say the late 90s, you know, his approach and you know, was very apropos for the time. You know, now, you know, some of that is not necessarily going to be the same, you know, sort of, it's not, in other words, the demand for space is different. It's calculated differently. It is, you know, effectively the kind of information sources that you have available now are clearly not the same as what was available, you know, back then, which was virtually nothing. You know, you pretty much had to drive around, talk to everybody to figure out what was going on. Now, for the most part, you can find out a lot of information just by pulling up 1 or 2 different websites and really get a good sense of what may be out there. Not saying that that should be your only source of information, but to a certain extent, a lot of information out there. Yep.
I had saw a fact from the NAR actually. It kind of took me back, so I was just searching for it. But it says that millennials report that 31% make more than $100,000 annually, and then in the last year, millennials bought 43% of the homes from $100,000 to $250,000, and 32% of the homes from $250,000 to $500,000.
What age, okay, what age
If you
range
became an
does
adult
millennial
in the new
get?
millennium.
Like, is that 35 or is that
Yeah, roughly.
28?
Well, it's, I don't know what the precise.
Because I would love to be making that much when I'm 30, but I mean.
If you turn 18, you're a millennial. Then you're a millennial.
No, that's right.
I'm 82, so 34.
So
It's
81 to
2000
96?
millennials, right? 1980
2000?
2000.
Okay.
So she's like, millennials don't take half the whole world, but they.
All right, let's spend the remainder of our time. We've got a bunch of other sort of administrative things I want to kind of get through, since this is one of the few captured moments I have with you to kind of take care of a few things. Talk about a little bit about next semester, and also I need to hold the people back that are going on the cruise so that we can try to make sure everything is finalized on that, and kind of, because I'm not going to see you again, or at least not on an extended basis until pretty much then. So we need to take care of all that sort of stuff. So let's talk for a few minutes about obviously the remainder of this semester, but also next semester, and kind of beyond, some of the different things we need to be sort of made aware of. All right, so obviously you've got a couple more meetings with Sam Miguel to finish out the capital markets class. And for this class, we will be meeting on December the 12th. I believe I said it at, what, 11 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there. And on that day, what you will be doing is presenting your final sort of, or your, not final, but your current version of your e-portfolio, okay? Which should contain whatever, information that you have done up until that particular point in time, and you should incorporate the other classes that you have taken up to this point in terms of the source materials and that sort of thing. So how is that process going along?
So, quick question. You said we're gonna meet on the 12th at 11 here.
Correct.
Does that mean that everybody's gonna get their own way to come here from the groups?
Yep. Normally you can depart the boat at about 7 o'clock in the morning, okay? So by that, you should be able to get back here, I would think, by 11.
So we eat and then we just go.
Whatever you need to do, but we're gonna start here at 11.
We have class that morning?
Yeah.
Not that morning,
At
11 o'clock.
If we're on the cruise.
Yes, you come back here, you still have to present your e-portfolio, okay?
Do I want to get like a taxi van or something? Just all share a ride?
I'm confused, maybe not confused, but clarify. We needed to be writing reports on these presentations, right?
Absolutely.
So then, how do you want those reports to be then in the e-portfolio? Just like, this is the topic, this is the person?
It's just like slides, like if you get
Yeah.
things like slides, like.
No, I've started it or whatever, but I'm just like trying to think about like.
I would, I mean, you know,
like, what are we supposed to be answering or like identifying?
No, here's what you should be doing. You should be sort of identifying who the person was, maybe, you know, a little bit of background about them to the extent that it was available. Then, you know, information about specifically what they talked about, you know, your own summary of what they talked about. But the most important piece is really going to be your insights about what they had to say.
Okay.
In other words, what it was about what they said that really struck you as being important, insightful, useful, you know, mind-blowing, whatever, okay? And to write that up, okay? Now, length of each of those, it's going to depend, you know? I mean, you know, am I looking for pages and pages for each person? No, I'm thinking, you know, you're going to have 2 or 3 sentences of an intro, you know, a paragraph or 2 about what they had to say, and a paragraph or so about your insights.
Okay.
You know, but enough substance there that someone can actually at least get a sense of what was going on.
Right, okay.
That you had to be there in order to write that.
Right.
Professor, for the ULI conference, you know, like we had like a debate or like a group of people talking about certain topics. I have their names, but I just talk about like what that panel had to talk about. I didn't
That's all you really can do in that case.
Yeah, because I didn't want to break down to each one. I mean, if
Right,
we don't have
and in that case, that's all you can do.
Okay, so it's like a group of things for
Right.
each one.
Right. Okay?
Can you pick and choose like which panels really influenced you more and talk into details about those and leave out on the other ones?
Here's what I would say to that. I would say you should include as much information as you possibly can, okay? And the picking and choosing, you know, it's not a situation of, I mean, I'm not trying to establish a hard and fast rule of you must use 90% of all speakers, you know, but I would say, you know, if you're not using at least 75 to 80% of them, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose. Okay? Now, you know, there's some people you may have only been able to squeeze a sentence or 2 out of, especially maybe some of the conference speakers for whatever reason, you know, language barriers or whatever, and I can get that. But all the people we've had here in the classroom, if you can't get a few paragraphs out of each of those folks, there's something wrong. Okay? Olivia, you had a question?
It was the same question, sir.
Okay. All right. Nope.
I guess so for like today, the first guy that talked with Chris, he said some things that I could really talk about. The lady,
Gloria?
yeah, she talked about host food, but I understood a little bit of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Here's what I would do if I were you. If that were the case with me, what I would be doing is I would be looking up all the information I could about her on her website.
She's on the program, on the MSRED.
Not just the MSR, I'm talking about like her company website, Helium Partners, you know, and looking at specifically, you know, what they're doing and getting information.
Because she was mitigating risk. It's a whole mantra.
Okay. Somebody over here, I thought I saw my hand up. No? Okay. So any other questions about the e-portfolio? Okay, now let's talk about the e-portfolio in the sense of what has been your experience thus far. Anybody want to share anything? learning, I mean, in the sense of good, bad, or ugly?
Okay, so I used Wix, and I got the platform down pretty good. I don't know if anyone else has been having this issue, but when I put per class, say I'll write the class, when I put the documents in, it shows them as actual like little documents, not as like a picture that goes to the document. I don't know if anyone else has been messing with
Mine,
it.
it keeps like disappearing. Like I do one and then I go and look again, and for some reason it deletes it, and then I put it back. I've been having an issue.
And which no. Which, you're using Internet Explorer, are you using Chrome, or are you using, because you were saying.
Chrome works best with Wix, and then if you're trying to like link it to a PDF, I can't see it in my head how to do it, but there is a way to like link it to.
Like a picture to a
Yeah, you can literally, like, I help my mom set up her teacher website all the time, and she links everything for her students, and like, there's a way, like, you click on it, a whole new page opens, like, to whatever.
Yeah, mine just deletes the
I
actual.
was playing with it again today, but I mean, I'm gonna be doing more tomorrow. If anyone has questions, I can answer them.
Because another thing,
Ways to go to first.
another thing that, you know, somebody had even mentioned that it would be kind of potentially cool, you could even link to the videos on the YouTube site that we've got for class, and like say that here's literally the entire semester of YouTube videos for, not saying you should, I'm just saying you could, in the sense that if, but if someone really, because it doesn't really take up space to link to the video, it takes up space if you actually post the video there. And my point with that being is that once again, a prospective employer, someone sort of taking a look, what did you actually do in that class? What was that class really like? They could, theoretically, look at the videos and at least get some sort of a sense of what was there. You don't have to, that is not me saying you need to do that. That is me saying that might be something to think about. Or taking clips from the class, especially the ones where you're giving a presentation that you would want to potentially be able to showcase, okay, here is me in action giving a presentation, so that here is an example of my presentation ability. Make sense? Okay, other issues, yep.
So, I've been thinking, I think as a group, a core group, we're getting so much from this program. I know we have MSRED student group. What is something, I think it's good for us to give back something. What is something you think we could do as a give back to the program?
Website. The website's good back.
You know, something we leave for posterity for those who come after us.
No, I think that's a great idea to potentially, you know, come up with something that, but I think what they're saying is that, in my mind, your e-portfolio is going to be a great way of effectively doing that, because to me, that's going to be an excellent tool to be able to show to prospective students that are coming in and saying, what is this really all about? And you know, now if you're wanting, as far as the student group is concerned, you're wanting to get involved in some sort of, you know, charitable kind of thing, if that's the direction that you're going. This just came out this past week, the South Florida Business Journal, their giving guide, and it is literally a whole number of nonprofits of different organizations that you potentially could pair up with, you know, as a student group to do something. If there is, you know, I know you probably don't have a lot of time, so I'm not trying to, you know, in any way, you know, say that I'm pressuring you to do something like that. But if in the event that's something that you guys did